The train station was a blur of hurried footsteps and distant whistles, the air thick with the scent of diesel and rain-soaked concrete. Emily stood alone on the platform, her worn suitcase at her feet, her hands resting protectively over her swollen belly. At 42, she was an anomaly in the eyes of the world, a woman deemed too old to be pregnant, too old to start anew. Her husband, Richard, had promised to meet her here, to take her to a new life in the city where they could raise their unexpected child together. But the hours ticked by, and he never came. She clutched her coat tighter, the chill seeping into her bones as passers-by cast fleeting, judgmental glances. Whispers followed her, sharp and cutting. "She's too old for this." What was she thinking? Poor thing, alone like that. Emily's heart sank with each passing train, each one carrying away a piece of her hope. She'd given up her job, her home, everything, to follow Richard's promises. They'd met late in life, two souls who thought love could rewrite their futures. But now, abandoned at this desolate station, she felt the weight of her choices crushing her. Her pregnancy, a miracle to her, was a burden to others, a topic of gossip in her small town. She'd endured months of raised eyebrows and unsolicited advice, but she'd held her head high, believing Richard's love would shield her. Now, standing alone, she wondered if she'd been naive. The platform emptied as the last train of the evening pulled away, leaving her with nothing but the echo of her own thoughts. She sank onto a bench, tears welling in her eyes, her hands trembling as they cradled her belly. The baby kicked, a small reminder of life amid her despair, but it wasn't enough to drown out the fear. What would she do now? Where would she go? The station's fluorescent lights flickered above, casting harsh shadows on her face. She felt exposed, vulnerable, a woman too old to dream, too pregnant to start over, too alone to know what came next. Yet, in that moment of quiet despair, a stranger approached a woman with kind eyes and a worn scarf, her steps slow but deliberate. Emily braced herself for another pitying look, another cruel whisper, but the stranger paused, her gaze soft and knowing. She leaned in close, her voice barely above a whisper, and said, "You're stronger than you know." Emily froze, the words cutting through the fog of her fear like a beacon. They were simple, yet they carried a weight she couldn't yet comprehend, a spark of something she'd forgotten she possessed. The stranger's hand brushed hers, a fleeting gesture of warmth, before she turned and disappeared into the night. Emily sat there, stunned, the words echoing in her mind, a lifeline in the darkness of her abandonment. Too, the stranger's words lingered in Emily's mind like a melody she couldn't shake, but the cold reality of the station quickly pulled her back. She had no money for a ticket, no phone to call for help. Richard had taken care of everything, or so she thought. Her savings were drained, poured into the dream of a new life that now seemed like a cruel mirage. She stared at the empty tracks, the silence deafening, and tried to piece together what had gone wrong. Richard had been so convincing, his promises painted with vivid colors, a cozy apartment, a nursery for their child, a fresh start away from the small-town gossip. She'd believed him because she wanted to, because love at her age felt like a rare gift. But now, the truth was undeniably he'd left her, whether by choice or circumstance, she might never know. The baby kicked again, harder this time, and Emily pressed her hand against her belly, whispering, "We'll be okay, little one." But the words felt hollow. She had no plan, no safety net, just a suitcase filled with clothes that no longer fit and a heart heavy with betrayal. The station was nearly deserted now, save for a janitor sweeping the far end of the platform. Emily considered asking for help, but pride held her back. She'd always been independent, a woman who'd built a career as a librarian, who'd lived alone for years before Richard. Yet here she was, reduced to a cautionary tale in the eyes of strangers. The shame burned, but so did a flicker of defiance. She wasn't just too old or too pregnant as she was Emily, a woman who'd faced loss before and survived. Her parents had passed when she was young, her first marriage had crumbled under the weight of infertility, and she'd rebuilt her life each time. This was different. The stakes were higher, the future murkier. She thought of the stranger's words again. "You're stronger than you know." What did that mean? Strength felt like a distant memory, buried under the weight of her exhaustion. Yet, as she sat there, she began to notice the small details around her. The way the rain had stopped, the faint stars peeking through the clouds, the warmth of her baby's movements. These were signs of life, of possibility, however faint. She stood, her legs shaky but determined, and picked up her suitcase. She didn't know where she'd go, but she couldn't stay here, frozen in despair. The station's clock ticked toward midnight, and Emily took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. She'd find a way, not just for herself, but for the life growing inside her. The stranger's whisper had planted a seed, and though she didn't fully understand it yet, it gave her the courage to take a single step forward into the unknown. 3. Emily walked toward the station's small ticket office, her suitcase dragging behind her like an anchor. The clerk, a tired-looking man with graying hair, barely looked up as she approached. "Last train's gone," he muttered, his voice flat. Emily's heart sank, but she forced herself to speak, her voice steadier than she felt. "Is there a bus, a shelter, anything nearby?" The clerk sighed, pointing to a faded sign listing a 24-hour diner a few blocks away. "They might let you sit there till morning," he said, already turning back to his newspaper. Emily nodded, grateful for even this small piece of direction. The night air was sharp as she stepped outside, the streets slick with rain, reflecting the dim glow of streetlights. She walked slowly, her body aching under the weight of her pregnancy and her suitcase. The diner's neon sign flickered in the distance, a beacon of warmth in the cold. Inside, the smell of coffee and fried eggs enveloped her, and she slid into a booth, her hands trembling as she set her suitcase down. The waitress, a woman with a kind face and a name tag reading Clara, brought her a glass of water without being asked. "You okay, hon?" Clara asked, her eyes lingering on Emily's belly. Emily nodded, too tired to explain, but Clara's gaze held no judgment, only concern. "Stay as long as you need," she said softly, before returning to the counter. Emily sipped the water, her mind racing. She had no money for food, no plan for the night, and no idea how to reach Richard or if she even wanted to. The betrayal stung, but so did the realization that she'd pinned her future on someone else's promises. She'd always prided herself on her independence, yet here she was, lost in a city she didn't know, with a child she hadn't planned for. The diner was quiet, save for the hum of a jukebox playing an old love song, its melody both comforting and cruel. Emily's thoughts drifted to her past, to her years as a librarian, surrounded by books that offered escape and wisdom, her quiet evenings gardening, her dreams of motherhood that had faded with time. This pregnancy had been a shock, a gift she hadn't dared hope for, but it came with a cost: the judgment of others, the strain on her body, the fear of doing it alone. Yet, as she sat in the diner, the stranger's words echoed again, "You're stronger than you know." She clung to them, turning them over in her mind like a precious stone. Clara returned with a plate of toast and eggs, setting it down without a word. "On the house," she said when Emily protested. The small act of kindness brought tears to Emily's eyes, and she ate slowly, savoring the warmth. The diner felt like a temporary haven, a place to gather her thoughts and her strength. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for now, she was safe, and that was enough to keep her going. 4. As the night deepened, the diner became a sanctuary of sorts, its fluorescent lights casting a soft glow over Emily's weary face. She watched the other patrons, a truck driver nursing a coffee, a young couple sharing a milkshake, an old man reading a tattered novel, and felt a strange sense of belonging. These were strangers, yet their presence grounded her, reminding her that life went on, even in the midst of her own chaos. She pulled a small notebook from her suitcase, a habit from her librarian days, and began to write. She listed her fears: being alone, failing her child, running out of money. Then, hesitantly, she wrote down her hopes: a safe place to live, a healthy baby, a chance to start over. The act of writing steadied her, giving shape to the whirlwind in her mind. Clara stopped by again, refilling her water and offering a slice of pie. "You look like you're figuring things out," she said, her voice warm but not intrusive. Emily managed a small smile, grateful for the lack of questions. She didn't want to explain Richard's absence or the weight of her choices. Instead, she asked Clara about the city, hoping to glean some sense of direction. Clara spoke of shelters for women, community centers, and a church that helped single mothers. Each word was a lifeline, a map to a future Emily couldn't yet see. She jotted down the names and addresses, her pen moving faster now, fueled by a growing sense of purpose. The stranger's whisper, "You're stronger than you know," it felt less like a mystery and more like a truth she was beginning to uncover. She thought of her mother, who'd raised her alone after her father's death, working long hours as a seamstress to keep them afloat. Emily had inherited that resilience, even if she'd forgotten it in the haze of Richard's promises. The pie was sweet, the crust flaky, and each bite reminded her of the small joys she'd once cherished. She realized she didn't need Richard to survive. She needed herself, her grit, her heart. The diner's clock showed 2 a.m., and Emily knew she couldn't stay forever. She thanked Clara, leaving a note of gratitude in her notebook, and stepped back into the night. The streets were quieter now, the air colder, but Emily felt a spark of determination. She headed toward the shelter Clara had mentioned, her suitcase lighter in her grip. The baby kicked again, as if cheering her on, and Emily whispered back, "We're going to make it." The stranger's words had become her mantra, a reminder that strength wasn't loud or showy, it was in the quiet choice to keep moving forward, one step at a time. The shelter was a modest building with peeling paint and a flickering sign, but its warmth enveloped Emily as she stepped inside. A woman at the front desk, her face lined with years of compassion, welcomed her without judgment. "We've got a bed for you," she said, handing Emily a key and a stack of clean towels. The room was small, with a narrow cot and a single window, but it felt like a palace after the uncertainty of the station. Emily sank onto the bed, her body aching but her mind alive with possibility. She thought of the stranger at the station, wondering who she was, why she'd spoken those words. Had she seen something in Emily that Emily couldn't see herself? The question lingered as she unpacked her suitcase, folding her clothes with care, as if reclaiming order in her life. She found a small photo of her and Richard, taken during happier times, and stared at it for a long moment. The pain of his betrayal was still raw, but she tucked the photo away, choosing not to let it define her. The shelter was quiet, save for the soft hum of voices from other rooms of women like her, each carrying their own stories of struggle and survival. Emily felt a kinship with them, even without knowing their names. She laid down, her hands resting on her belly, and let her thoughts drift to her baby. She imagined a little girl with her eyes, or a boy with her stubborn streak, and the images filled her with a fierce determination. She'd been called too old by doctors, neighbors, even Richard at times, but age was just a number, not a measure of her worth. The stranger's words echoed again, and Emily began to see them as a challenge yet to prove to herself, and the world, that she was enough. She thought of the resources Clara had mentioned, the community centers and job programs. Tomorrow, she'd start there, rebuilding her life brick by brick. Sleep came slowly, her mind buzzing with plans, but when it arrived, it was deep and restorative. She dreamed of a garden, like the one she'd tended back home, blooming with flowers that defied the seasons. The dream felt like a promise, a reminder that growth was possible even in the harshest conditions. When she woke, sunlight streamed through the window, and Emily felt a clarity she hadn't known in months. She showered, dressed, and headed to the shelter's common room, where breakfast was served. The other women smiled at her, some offering shy hellos, and Emily felt a spark of connection. She wasn't alone, and not entirely. The stranger's whisper had ignited something within her, a belief in her own resilience, and now, in this humble shelter, she was ready to take the next step. 6. The community center was a short bus ride away, and Emily arrived with her notebook in hand, ready to rebuild. The building buzzed with activity, children playing in a corner, volunteers sorting donations, a bulletin board plastered with job listings and support group flyers. Emily felt a mix of hope and overwhelm as she approached the front desk, where a young woman named Mia greeted her with a warm smile. "What do you need?" Mia asked, her tone practical but kind. Emily hesitated, then poured out her story, and not the whole tale, but enough. Pregnant, alone, starting over. Mia listened without interruption, then handed her a stack of pamphlets on prenatal care, housing assistance, and job training programs. "You're not the first to walk through these doors," Mia said, and you won't be the last. But you're here, and that's a start. Emily spent the day attending workshops, learning about a resume building and childcare options. Each session chipped away at her fear, replacing it with knowledge and possibility. She met other women, some younger, some older, all navigating their own hardships. A woman named Sarah, shared her story of escaping an abusive marriage and finding work as a nurse's aide. "It's not easy," Sarah said, "but it's worth it." Emily nodded, inspired by the resilience around her. She signed up for a job training program, her years as a librarian giving her skills she hadn't realized were transferable. Organization, research, communication. The center offered free prenatal checkups, and Emily scheduled one, feeling a surge of relief at knowing her baby would be cared for. As the day wore on, she thought of the stranger again, her words a quiet pulse in Emily's mind. "You're stronger than you know." She was beginning to believe it, not just because of the stranger, but because of the steps she was taking, the community she was finding. By evening, she returned to the shelter, exhausted but hopeful. She wrote in her notebook, listing the day's accomplishments: a job application submitted, a doctor's appointment booked, a new friend in Sarah. The list was small, but it felt monumental. Emily realized she was no longer just surviving as she was building. The baby kicked, as if in agreement, and Emily smiled, whispering, "We're doing this, you and me." The shelter's common room was lively that night, with women sharing stories over cups of tea. Emily joined them, her voice tentative at first, then stronger. She wasn't just Emily, the abandoned woman at the station, as she was Emily, the mother-to-be, the survivor, the woman who refused to give up. 7 days turned into weeks, and Emily's life began to take shape. The job training program led to a part-time position at a local library, a familiar world of books and quiet order that felt like home. The pay was modest, but it was enough to rent a small studio apartment, a space she filled with second-hand furniture and dreams for her baby. She painted the walls a soft yellow, imagining a crib in the corner, a mobile spinning above. The community center remained her anchor, a place where she attended prenatal classes and bonded with other mothers. Sarah became a close friend, their shared meals and late-night talks a balm for Emily's lingering pain. Richard's absence still stung, but it no longer defined her. She'd stopped trying to contact him, choosing instead to focus on the future. Her pregnancy progressed, each doctor's visit confirming her baby's health, and Emily felt a growing pride in her body's strength. She was 42, yes, but she was also capable, resilient, alive. The stranger's words, "a year stronger than you know," had become a touchstone, a reminder of her own power. She thought of the station often, not with bitterness, but with gratitude for the moment that had shifted her perspective. The stranger, whoever she was, had given her a gift, not just words, but the spark of belief that carried her through the darkest nights. Emily began volunteering at the shelter, helping other women navigate the resources that had saved her. She shared her story, not as a tale of victimhood, but as proof that survival was possible. The other women listened, some with tears, some with nods of recognition, and Emily felt a purpose she hadn't known before. She was no longer just a woman left at a station, as she was a beacon for others, a testament to resilience. Her apartment, though small, became a haven, filled with books, plants, and a growing collection of baby clothes donated by the community. Each night, she read to her belly, stories of adventure and hope, her voice steady and sure. The baby's kicks were her applause, her encouragement to keep going. Emily knew challenges late at the motherhood would be hard, money would be tight up, but she also knew she could face them. The stranger's whisper had awakened something within her, a strength she carried like a flame, ready to light her way. 8. The day her daughter was born, Emily felt the world shift. The labor was long, the pain intense, but when she held little Grace in her arms, everything else faded. Grace's tiny fingers curled around hers, and Emily wept, not from sorrow, but from a love so fierce it overwhelmed her. The hospital room was quiet, the city outside a distant hum, and in that moment, Emily knew she'd made it. She'd survived the station, the betrayal, the judgment, and emerged stronger, just as the stranger had said. She thought of that night often, the stranger's face a blur but her words etched in her heart, "You're stronger than you know." Grace was proof of that strength, a living testament to Emily's resilience. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of sleepless nights and new joys, but Emily navigated them with a confidence she hadn't known she possessed. Sarah and the woman from the shelter visited, bringing meals and laughter, their presence a reminder of the community that had lifted her up. The library job became full-time, and Emily thrived, her love of books now shared with her daughter, who cooed at the sound of her mother's voice reading. The apartment, once bare, was now a home, filled with Grace's giggles and Emily's growing dreams. She enrolled in night classes, studying social work, determined to help others as she'd been helped. The stranger's words had become a mantra, not just for her, but for the woman she met at the shelter, where she continued to volunteer. She told them her story, from the station to the hospital, from despair to triumph, and watched their eyes light up with hope. Emily never saw the stranger again, but she carried her gratitude like a talisman, a reminder that kindness, however brief, could change a life. As Grace grew, so did Emily's sense of purpose. She was no longer too old or too pregnant, as she was enough, exactly as she was. The station, once a place of abandonment, became a symbol of her rebirth. The moment she began to see her own strength, and as she rocked Grace to sleep each night, Emily whispered to her daughter, "You're stronger than you know," passing on the gift that had saved her, a legacy of resilience for the next generation.